On the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. We are the official podcast of the Lot 1 Tailgate Party, which is at Lambeau Field every home game. This is episode 134, created January 21st, 2026. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight I'm drinking Elijah Craig's Toasted Barrel Bourbon. Neat.
We saw a lot of loose cannon play at quarterback this weekend, and so I'm having a Heavy Seas Loose Cannon IPA.
Neil, did you know my roller derby name is Lou Scannon? That's a true story. My beverage tonight in my souvenir Quick Trip Packers thermal glass is a hot drink, hot chocolate candy bar is what it is called. All right. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. And just the audio is available on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify by searching for Green Bay Chat. Not much to talk about this week. Packers haven't played, but there were 4 games in the divisional round, and it's probably time to really revise those predictions again as championship weekend comes around. We're going to take a look at some connections to Green Bay and the 4 teams that are remaining. But with that said, let's take a look around the last weekend. 4 games didn't quite turn out the way we expected them to turn out. And for 4 fan bases, specifically the Buffalo Bills, the San Francisco 49ers, Houston Texans, and yes, the Chicago Bears. Boy, it did not turn out for them this weekend either, did it? Neil, you don't give a fuck, do you?
There was some quality hate watching, especially in that Bears game, but I am not engaging in hate watching for the other football because Arsenal are on top of the Champions League lead phase. We're on top of the league by 7 points. And on top of that, we defeated Chelsea in the League Cup, and we are now 1 leg in the door for the final. It is a great week of football as far as Arsenal is concerned. And I guess we have to deal with that other football too.
That explains why you're wearing red.
And also a Cannon team.
Well, as far as the teams that are alive, so coming up this weekend, New England at Denver and the Rams at Seattle. And let's not worry about all of our predictions that we originally made. We can wipe the slate clean and pretend like we know what we're talking about. But let's get into the weekend in general. First of all, let's take a look at that first game, the Buffalo Bills and the Denver Broncos. And this is a game where I think all 3 of us, we've been rooting kind of tacitly for Buffalo for the last few years. We like the people of Buffalo. We had a great visit there. But they have a great quarterback in Josh Allen. This is a team that now suddenly has fired their head coach, but this is a team that there were huge, huge expectations for them, not only through the last couple of seasons, but this year as well, and their season has ended.
Well, when there's not a single team remaining in the AFC with a good quarterback, and you're the one team with an MVP quarterback, you have higher expectations than that. And unfortunately, 449 yards don't do a lot of good when your team also has 5 turnovers.
He tried. He did about all he could. This is one where I'm not going to beat this to death, but if you're going to call defensive pass interference, call it the whole game or don't call it at all.
First of all, of the 2 defensive pass interferences, the first one also had a roughing the quarterback. There would have been 2 yards fewer than that. So I just don't have a lot of patience for that. And the other one, it was a pretty brutal pass interference. I didn't have a problem with any of the referee calls at the end of the game. I don't care how much the fans want to whine about it. Sure, you've got your own bias because of the team you cheer for, but there was nothing wrong with those calls, in my opinion.
You know how it goes, Jeff, right? I mean, we had Charles here and we were talking about the Chiefs and how the Chiefs get calls and things like that, right? We would have a nice long conversation. But as you said, Jeff, you don't want to beat that one too badly. But yeah, Josh Allen, 25 of 39, 283 yards passing. He did have 3 touchdown passes, but he does throw the 2 interceptions in that game.
And 2 lost fumbles for Josh Allen.
Yeah, right. He lost 2 of those 3 fumbles. So this is a guy that you want to have put the team on his back and lead them. But I think the weight of this team was too much, and you could just tell. I mean, there are spots where he, looked great, looked like an MVP player, but then other plays, 4 of them in particular, just collapsed.
Well, and he was not alone this weekend in really sloppy quarterback play. Loose cannon, yes. I mean, I don't know if it was just the quarterbacks in general trying to do too much. At the end of the day, Jordan Love's performance in the wild card by far outshone any other quarterback's performance this entire playoffs.
I think we have to give some credit to Bo Nix, though, in that game, which I think is part of the reason why it was disappointing as a general football fan to see him go down with injuries, because he made some big plays down the stretch of that game. And I came out of that game impressed by Bo Nix and feeling better about Denver going to and potentially winning the Super Bowl. And obviously, that injury changes these thoughts, but Nix has shown growth. There is no doubt about that.
Well, and what a crazy plot twist.
Oh, yeah.
Here, the Broncos fans are celebrating and everything. And I talked to a buddy of mine who's a Broncos fan, and he had no idea that Nix was hurt. All of a sudden, like, his Twitter buddies and his text buddies are like, sorry to hear that. And he's like, what are you talking about? And then when the news broke, it would talk about a kick in the balls.
Well,
Wow.
and nobody really knew, right? I mean, when you watch the play that it supposedly happened on that play where he loses some yardage running out around the end, he walks it off. It doesn't look like he's even injured at all. And then you find out after the game, it's like, oh, yeah, he broke a bone. He's out for the season. He's having surgery on Tuesday.
What?
Yeah, I think I would have been limping maybe a little bit.
I mean, adrenaline. I mean, I'm sure he felt it, but under the circumstances, he wasn't going to come out of the game. As long as it wasn't sticking through, he's going to stay in there.
So now the Broncos team comes down to Jarrett Stidham, a fourth-round draft pick from 2019, who, entertainingly enough, originally played for the Patriots. But fourth-round picks from 2019 that only have 4 total starts in their career do not scream confidence in a playoff atmosphere.
Well, I'll tell you what, Patriots don't have a lot of film on them. That's for sure.
That's probably the good news there. But yeah, I mean, Sean Payton is going to have his work cut out for him this week to get Stidham ready to go. I mean, he's been there all season. I'm sure he knows the offense, but
he's been there 3 seasons. He knows it quite well at this point.
Yeah, you got to get this kid prepared for literally the biggest game of his career, biggest game of the season for the Broncos. And this is a team that I think we expected Denver to do well this year, but unless you're just a crazy Homer fan, like always picking your team to win, I don't think there was anybody who really expected Denver to be hosting the AFC Championship game when, preseason predictions were being made. Not pointing the finger at you guys about being homers at all.
Life is more fun as a homer, John.
It is. But with that said, let's look at the other AFC game first before we go to the NFC games. So the New England Patriots, the 2 seed, that's the nice thing about that 2 seed, right? 2 home games in a row, presuming you win. They get the Houston Texans in there, and boy, what the hell happened to the vaunted Houston Texans defense?
Their defense was fine. The Patriots only had 248 yards in the game. The problem is when you have 5 turnovers once again, 4 of which are first half interceptions, well, your game plan is kind of going to go to shit right off the bat. And when you're playing a possession-based game, when you're playing a field position game, and you're constantly giving the ball to the other team, well, that game plan is really in trouble.
CJ Stroud was bad in this game. You had Will Anderson. I think the Houston defense, they played well. They put a lot of pressure. Drake May looked pretty pedestrian in this game, but 5 turnovers. Again, the quarterback trying to do just absolutely too much.
But I'm going to push back on this quarterback trying to do too much, because the reason why the quarterback had to do too much is because Houston's running game absolutely sucked ass. They had 20 rushes from running backs for only 37 yards. If they were getting any offense, that had to come from the quarterback. And unfortunately, his play level was not great, as reflected by his 21.1 QBR. But you want to know what's amazing? Drake May's QBR was actually lower at 20.8 for that game.
Yeah, 179 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and interception. But the Houston defense gets 5 sacks on May in that game. And then by comparison, CJ Stroud, 212 yards passing, a touchdown, and 4 interceptions.
212 yards passing on 50 dropbacks.
And we look at the career of CJ Stroud. I mean, he came on strong as a rookie. And then remember last season when the Texans came to Green Bay, how much we looked forward to this Stroud versus Love game, the 2 future league leading quarterbacks. And something in that sophomore season, Stroud definitely fell off. He clearly picked back up this season, but then just regression in this game. You're right. I mean, he just kind of fell apart. As far as the defense goes, like I said, I mean, what's the most important stat? Not just winning the game, but putting points on the board. They couldn't keep New England still out of the end zone. 28 points for the Patriots in this game. So that'll set up an AFC Championship game of the Patriots at the Broncos. We'll come back and talk about that in a moment. But let's look at what happened in the NFC over the weekend, the Saturday matchup. Boy, the Seattle Seahawks, not only were they ready, but their fans were ready. That stadium in prime time Saturday night was electric. Now, the San Francisco 49ers, this is a team that they're on borrowed time, lots of injuries. We talked about this last week. hey, they had a lot of injuries, but they have decent backups. They figured out a way to win by comparison to Green Bay with a lot of injuries. Couldn't get the backups to win the game. San Francisco gets one extra game out of this, but then just trounced 41-6.
But you know what was most amazing about that game? An asshats touchdown on the first play of the game. Like, asshats can be positive contributors to your game plan. Who knew?
13 seconds into the game, and Seattle had scored enough points to cover the victory.
We saw a lot of positive asshat play. I mean, we saw some crappy negative as well, but I know what a concept when you have the asshats, the special teams really humming along and making a difference.
The other thing that makes a difference, though, in the playoffs is being able to run the football. So in contrast to Houston's inability to run the ball, Seattle's running backs, 33 rushes, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's grinding out a victory, and offensive line play is so critical, and knowing how to do that balance. Sam Darnold did not have to do a lot in that game because the running game was so dominant.
Yeah, those rushing numbers spread out amongst 5 players, but yeah, it's Kenneth Walker III who carries the brunt of that. 19 carries, 116 yards. He had the 3 touchdowns in that game, and you're right, Sam Darnold. This is my reason for picking Seattle through this is because, boy, I really, Jeff, want to know how the Vikings fans feel right now about Sam Darnold doing well. Now, 12 of 17, 124 yards, not a great game. Threw a touchdown, got sacked twice, but as Neil mentioned, hey, if you're going to put 175 yards on the ground and score 3 touchdowns on the ground, you don't need your quarterback to do much else.
2 words, game manager. He didn't turn the ball over. He didn't do Sam Darnold stupid things. He didn't do what the other quarterbacks on this weekend did do, is throw interceptions, fumble a ball. He didn't have any turnovers. His team won the game.
And right on the other side of the ball then for San Francisco, this whole weekend is probably you look at turnovers, right? The turnover differential. Brock Purdy throws a pick, but there's also 3 fumbles out there for the 49ers throughout the game as well. And as you said, Jeff, hey, game management, if everybody's doing everything right, you don't have to do any fancy stuff as a quarterback, right? You just let your team go down the field and win. And boy, they won big with 41 points on the board.
I think we're not giving enough credit, though, to the defenses that are forcing these turnovers as well. It's one thing to say, well, let's blame the quarterback, let's blame everyone else, but somebody's got to force those turnovers. And after this lack of forced turnovers for the Packers all season, it was actually enjoyable to say, hey, look, opposing teams actually can force turnovers and can change the nature of how the game flows because of those turnovers. And hopefully we get back to those turnovers next year because, man, that was something that was so critical throughout the entire weekend was great defensive play.
Absolutely. Not only getting a rush up front, but defensive backs and safeties catching the interceptions. Again, what a concept.
Well, Neil, if you want to talk about defenses forcing turnovers and maybe blaming a quarterback for a loss, let's look at that Rams-Bears game, right?
That was such a great hate watch. Didn't look good throughout, to be fair, but it
Caleb
worked out in the end.
23 of 42, 257 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Now, his last throw in the game is the interception that seals the deal. But before that, he throws what is by far and away the most incredible touchdown pass I think I have ever seen. It was, a 16-yard touchdown pass by where they were on the field. But the ball in the air went 52 yards from the point of release to the point of catch where Cole Kmet caught it in the end zone. That play will be studied for years. It is unreal how Caleb Williams ran out of that blitz, found a spot to set up, and just launched it to the corner of the end zone where Kmet fought for the ball and got open.
You know what I like, though? That was terrible movement by Caleb Williams to get back where he was. There's no way that play should have been connected for a touchdown. And yes, it's a beautiful highlight reel element, but it also says Caleb Williams is still making terrible decisions on the football field.
I'm going to counter that. I think that if you watch that a little bit, quarterback naturally is going to roll back and kind of sidestep and run backwards. There is a moment where he does turn and face the direction he's running towards midfield because he gets a little burst of speed to get away from the players chasing him. He gets to a point where he knows, I can't throw much farther than this. He's got a little bit of separation there before he sets and literally throws up a prayer. This was the Hail Maryest of Hail Marys that there ever was, but there's only one receiver in that corner of the end zone that he knew was going to be there.
Yeah, but there were 2 defenders that could have made a play, and that reminded me a lot of some Packers defending we've seen this year.
There was some pushing going on. When you watch the isolated camera on Kmet in the end zone, there's a lot of grab ass going on, I guess is a good way to put it. And Jeff, hey, the officials let him play and let it happen. And when you pulled away from it, both Rams defenders are looking for the flag because they just cannot believe how Kmet got away with just this massive shove to force himself open in the corner.
Yeah, it seemed like the defensive backs just sort of gave up because they figured that there's no way in hell he's going to get the ball here. Was it a good play? Of course. Was it one of the better plays perhaps in Bears history? Yes. In playoff history, no. There's a guy by the name of Aaron Rodgers. Maybe you've heard of him, who had a couple of pretty amazing Hail Mary passes longer.
Right. This is a pass
equally as substantial.
This is a pass that should have been in the air, 20-yard pass or something more precise, as opposed to running back to the 40-yard line and throwing up a prayer like that.
Right, but to Neil's point, it was Caleb Williams' choice to run backwards to escape the pass rush, whereas Aaron Rodgers was forced to throw the ball 60-plus yards in his achievement. So again, was it shocking and like, holy shit, now the game is tied? Now here's the thing, though. Should the Bears have gone for 2?
That's a question. Yeah, right. I think that when you're watching the end of that game, the announcers certainly were pushing for going for 2. And I think they did talk to Ben Johnson afterwards and ask that question. And Johnson rightfully said, we weren't controlling the line of scrimmage. I know, Neil, you like to talk statistics and going for it and things like that. But as a coach, if you know your team isn't controlling the line, you're not getting that push for 2 yards, you got to take the safe point and hope for the best in overtime there.
The thing that the Rams did do, though, is they were able to control the line of scrimmage much more effectively. They got over 100 yards rushing, not a ton per attempt, but it was shocking to see Sean McVay coaching like a member of the Sean McVay team and doing wild runs down on 3rd down and not going for getting that first down and trusting your quarterback. It was like watching Matt LaFleur out there, and not the good Matt LaFleur who has everything designed brilliantly at the beginning of the game. It was the indecisive, he's too caught up in his play sheet and makes brain farts in the moment. And thankfully they were able to overcome that. And obviously Caleb Williams played a role in that. But Stafford, even if he wasn't sharp, I would trust Stafford with the ball when, if all you need is a first down to essentially win the game, you give Stafford the chance to do that. You don't say that we're going to hope that our running back can do it, when they've got 6 yards to go on 3rd down as well. It was just continued questionable calls from Sean McVay that probably caused that game to last longer than it needed to.
They took their foot off the proverbial gas there at the end, and it was just like, we saw it coming. We're just like, oh, he's just gonna run the damn ball now. And they prevailed, but yes, there was questionable calls along the way.
One thing that was noteworthy is that there was no problem for anyone kicking the ball in Soldier Field in that cold weather. Soldier Field kicking over the playoffs ends up 12 out of 12 kicks for every kicker not named Brandon McManus, 3 of 6 for Brandon McManus. And I think the most amazing element of that overall is that there were only 7 missed kicks so far in the playoff. 3 of those, or 43%, from Brandon McManus. We played 1 game and we've got almost half of all missed kicks from our 1 kicker.
All right, well, Neil, there'll be plenty of time in the offseason to talk about our kicker controversy and who we need to bring into camp and see how that goes. But what a roller coaster of emotion for the Bears fans in Soldier Field. Neil, you saw it 2 weeks ago. That first half was very dismal, and they went from a low to a high. And now this week, I mean, that place had to have been absolutely just bonkers on that Caleb Williams touchdown pass to Kmet to tie the game. And then to turn it around to the twists and turns of the overtime, and then the Rams getting that field goal, the video clips that you get from the stands in that one, and just the collective breath taken out of everybody at that moment that ball goes through the uprights.
It's why you watch sports, right? You can't appreciate the highs if you don't also experience the lows. And certainly we could deal with a significantly smaller number of lows right now as far as the Packers timeline is concerned, but that's all part of fandom. And I think that Bears fans, when they've got time to reflect, are going to come out of this season feeling very, very good, despite the fact that it ended, because they still made it further than anyone expected they were going to make it this year.
Yeah, with the highs and the lows, a discussion for another day, which sport, football or baseball, has the better analogies to life. But you're right. That's why we watch sports and why we are fans and why we are crazy about the teams that we love and why we talk about the teams that we don't love and say, hey, we're okay that you lost that game.
Oh, John, we're more than okay.
Oh, my gosh. How insufferable would this week be if Chicago was heading off to Seattle to play in the championship game?
I don't even want to think about it.
And that brings us to championship weekend. So there are 2 games this weekend and then the Super Bowl. And then, boy, it's 6 months of nothing, right? 3 games. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Neil's got other football to worry about in the meantime. But we're going to take a look at the AFC and the NFC championship games and their connections to the Green Bay Packers. Now, the game on Sunday starts at 1 p.m. local time for the Denver Broncos. They are hosting the New England Patriots. And probably the biggest connection that the Denver Broncos have right now to the Green Bay Packers is offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. He is the grandson of Vince Lombardi. Now, Joe grew up in Seattle. He went to the Air Force Academy. He served 4 years on active duty in the Air Force before coming back to football, making his way through the league. He has been an offensive coordinator in Detroit as well as with the Chargers. He was on the New Orleans Saints staff when they won the Super Bowl. He doesn't have a coaching connection to Green Bay, but he certainly has the bloodline connection as he is the grandson of Vince Lombardi. One other Broncos connection, a name that people like to kick around so far is Jim Leonard. Hey, we can't interview Jim Leonard until the Broncos are done playing.
And the New England Patriots connection is a guy by the name of Eliot Wolf, here pictured with his father, Ron Wolf. He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and all the wonderful things that Ron did in Green Bay. So his son, I think you could call him a chip off the old block. So Eliot Wolf, his scouting career began unofficially at age 10 when he joined his father in film sessions at Lambeau Field. Eliot went to Notre Dame Academy in Green Bay and then went to the University of Miami, and he graduated from the University of Miami in 3.5 years so that he could participate in the 2004 NFL Draft as the Green Bay Packers pro personnel assistant. And that began a career in Green Bay that he spanned many, many different jobs and worked his way up. So he was with the Packers from 2004 through 2017 in this wide variety of roles. Also, he was the assistant director of pro personnel when the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010. As he made his way up, he was one of 4 candidates interviewed to become the Packers' new general manager in 2018, which ultimately was awarded to Brian Gutekunst. Goody gets the job. Mr. Wolf says, I'm out of here. He follows John Dorsey and worked for a few years with the Cleveland Browns. After the Cleveland Browns, starting in 2020, he was hired by the New England Patriots as a consultant. But he quickly moved up from a consultant to the director of scouting to his current position today, since 2024, of Executive Vice President of Player Personnel and de facto General Manager. So when Mike Vrabel was hired in 2024, there were some thoughts that, okay, how are these guys going to work together? Apparently they work together pretty well. They brought in a lot of good talent from the 2025 draft, although Vrabel has the final say in personnel decisions, thus his title of de facto general manager. So the big question here, depending on what happens in these upcoming games and the trajectory that the Patriots take, will Eliot Wolf leave the Patriots to seek a GM position elsewhere?
And you're right, Jeff. That decision probably is going to be contingent on how well the New England Patriots do. So they are in Denver this weekend. It's the early matchup, the AFC Championship game. Both teams looking good coming into this. Both teams playing well over expectations. I think we're tired of New England in the Super Bowl. And for me personally, my love-hate relationship with the city of Denver just continues in the whole state of Colorado. But, I'm going to take the Denver Broncos coming out of this one just because they have that home field advantage. And, well, now I got to change that. No, I don't. Jarrett Stidham is not going to win this game, is he? No. God darn it. The New England Patriots, Jeff, are going to win, and then we'll see what happens to Eliot Wolf when the Patriots advance to Super Bowl 60.
The New England Patriots had impressive defense in the game against the Houston Texans, but on the other hand, they were facing the Houston Texans, and Drake May, as we stated earlier, actually had a worse game by QBR than CJ Stroud. I don't have a lot of faith in Drake May. He's played a lot of really soft defenses along the way. And the other thing is the Denver Broncos defense is also really good, and they do have that home field advantage. And the Denver Broncos don't need to have top-level quarterback play in order to beat the New England Patriots. This may be a heart over head type of situation. I just fucking can't stand the Patriots. I'd rather see the Broncos make to the Super Bowl. So I'm going to stay with the Broncos pick that I originally had back a couple weeks ago.
If this game was in New England, I think that New England wins easily. But because it's in Denver, when Jared Stidham is calling the plays, it's going to be dead silent. So I think that gives a little bit of an advantage. Again, there's no tape on this guy. Nobody knows what's going to happen on offense. And plus the mile high, I'm going to go with Denver here as well. I don't hate the Patriots, but let's let Denver have their time in the sun and let's have them go to the Super Bowl.
If Houston can sack Drake May 5 times, how many times is Denver going to sack Drake May? I think that's our real line of hope.
And the late game on Sunday, the Los Angeles Rams will head up to Seattle to play the 1-seed Seattle Seahawks. And there's some connections between the Rams and the Seahawks. And not only is there a Packers connection to the Seattle Seahawks, Neil, but you have a connection to the Seahawks connection to the Green Bay Packers.
Seattle GM and president John Schneider is actually from Green Bay, did not move there, but was born in Green Bay. And perhaps more relevantly, he lived 2 blocks away from me when he was a kid. So my parents were good friends with the Adaires, colleagues at work, and also friends at home. So when I was young, we went down to the Adaires house with some frequency. The next door house was the Schneider household. And so I've been inside the Schneider household. It was not somebody that I remember from that time. He's a year younger than we are, but there was certainly a situation where I've certainly played kick the can or other things with him. My mom still refers to him as Little Johnny Schneider because of those memories from when he was really little. And he obviously then continued in football, went to Pennings High School in De Pere, went from there to University of St. Thomas in Minnesota, and did one of the boldest things one can do as far as getting a job. During his junior year, he just wrote a letter to Ron Wolf and said, I'd like to get into scouting. Is there anything that I can do that can get me involved with the Green Bay Packers? And Ron Wolf amazingly said yes. So right out of college, he immediately started as a scout for the Packers, worked there for several years. And obviously they recognized his football mind early on because he quickly moved on to the late 90s with the Kansas City Chiefs as director of pro personnel, became a director of player personnel for the Seahawks, moved back to Green Bay as an assistant to the general manager for a number of years, and eventually the director of football operations in the 08 and 09 seasons before the Seattle Seahawks nabbed him as the general manager in 2010. Obviously, he's done fabulously there with a couple of Super Bowl appearances and a Super Bowl victory. But it all started at this little house on Bitters Court where this geeky kid decided that he was going to really get into football.
Full disclosure, Neil, in 1993, I wrote a similar letter and attached a resume to it using my connection through my neighbor, Bill Brault, who still knew a lot of people in the front office at 1265. That resume and letter apparently ended up in the recycling bin, did not have as much success as John Schneider had with the team, which is unfortunate, right? We're looking at the NFC Championship game. Hey, that brings us to the LA Rams. And I was torn on this issue because I've been pulling for Seattle only because of Jeff the Sam Darnold connection at quarterback. It's just delicious to see how he's performing, knowing that the Minnesota Vikings fans gave up on him so quickly. But as we enter championship game weekend, I'm drawn to the LA Rams now because of Davante Adams. Davante Adams was a second-round draft pick of the Green Bay Packers in 2014, playing 8 seasons in Green Bay. Here are some of his accolades as one of the best wide receivers in Green Bay. Second in career receptions with 669, 74 ahead of Sterling Sharp there. Fourth in career receiving yards with 8,121, just 13 yards behind Sterling Sharp. Second in touchdown receptions with 73, 8 ahead of Sterling Sharp. And second in number of 100-yard games with 31, that's 2 better than Sterling Sharp. Before leaving Green Bay, Davante Adams was the first player in NFL history to have 100-plus catches and 18 or more touchdowns in the same season. Since leaving Green Bay, Davante Adams has twice led the league in touchdown receptions. He became the first player to ever lead the league in touchdown receptions in 3 different seasons with 3 different teams: Green Bay, Las Vegas Raiders, LA Rams. After 12 seasons in the league, Davante Adams is 26th all-time with 12,633 receiving yards, 16th all-time with 1,017 receptions, and he now has 117 touchdown receptions, which puts him 7th all-time between Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Chris Carter, Marvin Harrison, and Larry Fitzgerald. That's 5 Hall of Famers and 1 future Hall of Famer. On the all-time touchdown list, Adams is also ahead of Hall of Famers Tim Brown, Steve Largent, and Donald Montgomery Hudson. I put a lot of comparisons out there to Sterling Sharp in regards to Adams' career in Green Bay. In my opinion, Davante Adams has had so far a Hall of Fame career, even though the numbers dropped slightly this season with just 60 catches, 789 yards. Adams still led the league in TD receptions. I feel like Davante Adams can play a few more seasons, but I strongly believe that getting a Super Bowl ring will help to cement his place in Canton, and I think that can happen in Super Bowl 60. I like now the LA Rams to take this one to the house and put Davante Adams' name up in the Ring of Honor of Lambeau Field.
John, that was all inspiring. The problem with
Yes.
that is that it also means Matthew Stafford will get a second Super Bowl
Yes.
ring. And people are just going to look at the rings and think, oh, well, Matthew Stafford was probably a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. And we know how foolish that is. I mean, how many MVPs does Matthew Stafford have? How much did Stafford hold his team back earlier in his career? And I do think about these legacy issues. You have a great counterpoint, John, as far as wanting Davante Adams to have this. I just don't want this ammunition behind Matthew Stafford. He's a good quarterback. He's played really well in a lot of situations. But in the end, I think about legacy issues. And I'm going to go back to your point in that I want to see Sam Darnold make it to the Super Bowl because I want Vikings fans in pain. We're into the haterade portion of the season, and let's see the Viking fans suffer as much as possible. In addition, the Seattle Seahawks have an historically good DVOA, combining both their offense and defense. In fact, the Rams do too. This is the best playoff matchup ever by DVOA of those two teams. There's something about the way that the Seattle Seahawks have been coached, the way that they've been constructed, the way they've taken advantage of the trade of Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos, and he used all of those picks in a Herschel Walker type of way in order to build up this incredible defense that they have. I think Sam Darnold is good enough as a game manager. They've got enough other things going on, and I see the Seattle Seahawks going to the Super Bowl.
I agree with you, Neil, for all of those reasons. The Sam Darnold component, though, that's just so delicious. Just to see this guy cast off, journeyman, has just an amazing season with the Vikings. And they're like, nah, we're good. We can find another one of these guys. I mean, I don't know if that's chutzpah. I don't know if that's just being stupid. I don't know. They didn't want to pay the guy. After one season, it was a prove it kind of contract. He proved it. So he was going to get paid. Should he have probably stayed? Of course the Vikings should have kept him. They didn't. They moved on. This story arc, just every week that Seattle keeps winning, it's more and more glorious. Again, Neil, all the reasons you said, special teams even, the asshats, they are a juggernaut. Success, if they do get to the Super Bowl, if they win the Super Bowl, it'll be very interesting to see how they handle that success, because this is a fairly young team, unproven, but man, they are the it team right now. And I think they've got all the momentum, and I think they will be, especially at home, I think they're going to win.
And let's just also add the entertainment of Sam Darnold from his time with the Jets when ESPN had Sam Darnold out with mononucleosis. And that graphic just is a continual source of entertainment for me anytime Sam Darnold's name is mentioned. And so let's go mononucleosis.
And to be fair, I will change my allegiance should the Seattle Seahawks come victorious. I think that the Super Bowl winner is going to come out of the NFC this year between these two teams. So as we get ready for Super Bowl 60, the only other thing we have to worry about is who will be the next defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. Jeff Hafley has been hired by the Miami Dolphins as head coach. The interviews have started. As I mentioned earlier, they can't talk to Jim Leonard yet until the Broncos are done playing. But Jeff, there are some guys that have already conducted some interviews in Green Bay.
Yeah, the confirmed interviews so far are Al Harris, former Packer Al Harris, Christian Parker, Jonathan Gannon, and Durante Jones.
I think a lot of people like Al Harris, too. We don't know a lot about him, how he would be as a defensive coordinator. He hasn't had that experience, but boy, bringing Al Harris to Green Bay would be great. As I mentioned, Jim Leonard. Jeff, I think Raheem Morris is another name that is probably atop of the list for a lot of people. So a lot of high hopes and high expectations for the next defensive coordinator coming into Green Bay.
Yeah, and that's why I hope it is not Al Harris and why I hope it's not Jim Leonard. I don't want sentimental picks for a defensive coordinator. I want somebody who's going to kick fucking ass and has demonstrated the ability to do that.
Neil, that's almost as exciting as the two championship games coming up this weekend. So we'll keep an eye on who's going to be the next defensive coordinator of the Packers. We'll be back next week to start talking about Super Bowl 60. In the meantime, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe and leave a comment. Find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word, Green Bay Chat. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Blue Sky, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and on Facebook at the GBC Podcast Green Bay Chat. And please follow us on any and all of those social media platforms. And may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.